And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and I just got thoroughly owned in the comments section of another YouTube channel, and I'm here to tell you all about it. But first, this is essentially going to be a Magic rules video, right? The interaction I had with this other content creator was a rules issue where I was actually wrong, and funny enough, I just did a video a couple of weeks ago talking about an interaction I had in the comments, as I do all the time, where someone was telling me I was wrong, and I went back and forth with them quite a bit. And of course, in that situation, I was very right and they were very wrong, but sometimes I get it wrong as well. But I am man enough to admit when I am. And in fact, I actually made a Magic Rules video a few months ago where I talked about a whole bunch of scenarios where I had got it wrong, but I correct myself. It is important for us to be all on the same page here, right? I don't say these things or do these Magic Rules videos just to dunk on people or say, nana, I'm right and you're wrong. We're doing it to clarify things so that we're all on the same page, because we all have to play this game together, right? And we all want to have fun, and bickering about the rules makes the game certainly a lot less fun. So I will be giving a shout out to Better Commander as promised, because that was the individual that I had the interaction with, not on my channel, on their channel, okay? They got their own channel. They're talking about Commander. Go check it out. I'm giving them a shout out as I said I would. I actually clicked on one of their videos and I saw this interaction that they were talking about that I thought was incorrect. And then they responded to me correcting my mistake. We actually went back and forth quite a bit before I realized my mistake. So what was the example they were talking about? Well, they were talking about Oscar the Reconstructor and Phyrexian Dreadnought. Of course, Phyrexian Dreadnought, funny old card, very, very unique. And because of the uniqueness of this card, it gets used in a lot of really interesting janky situations. It's a 1 mana 12/12, which of course is ridiculous. It's an artifact creature that has trample, but when it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you sacrifice any number of creatures with total power 12 or greater. Now, of course, because it is a artifact creature, you can use that resurrection effect, that token copy creation effect with your Oscar. This is the interaction that they were talking about on their channel. So X and tap, exile an artifact card with mana value X from your graveyard. Create 2 tokens that are copies of that card. Activate only as a sorcery. So of course, getting your Phyrexian Dreadnought in the graveyard is easy enough. Just pay 1 mana, you let it sacrifice to its own ability, it goes to the graveyard, then you pay 1 mana, exile it from your graveyard and create 2 token copies. And what they said is you get to keep one of them. And I was like, hold on a second, why would you get to keep one of them? They both are going to have those ETB triggers that both go on the stack, and you're going to have to fulfill that ETB in order to keep them around. So sorry, they actually will both get sacrificed by their own ability. But I was wrong. This actually does work. You just have to manipulate the stack and the triggers appropriately, right? So in order to figure out how this works, or how I will explain how it works, is we have to actually number these so things don't get confused, all right? We use our Oscar's ability and we create our 2 token copies of Phyrexian Dreadnought that we will call Thing 1 and Thing 2. So when these enter the battlefield, they will both trigger at the same time, because of course they're both created at the same time, but because they're your abilities, you will get to choose how they go on the stack, right? Just like I talked about in my stack video. Whenever you have a whole bunch of things triggering all at once, if they're your abilities, you get to choose the order that they go on the stack. And of course, as always, first in, last out, which means the first ability on the stack will be the last to resolve. Now, how this will work is I will put these abilities on the stack, and it doesn't really matter, I guess, which order you put them on the stack, because both of these guys are identical. You just want to keep one of them. So we're going to have Thing 1 go on the stack first, and then Thing 2 go on the stack second. So Thing 2 will have its ability resolve first. And of course it says, sacrifice it unless you sacrifice any number of creatures with total power 12 or greater. So we're going to choose to sacrifice creatures with total power 12 or greater. And wouldn't you know it, we have another creature sitting on the battlefield, Thing 1, that is power 12 or greater. So we're going to sacrifice that to Thing 2's ability. So now we get to keep Thing 2. That ability has now resolved, and let's move to the next one, right? The Thing 1 ability. Now, keep in mind, Thing 1 is long gone, right? It's already been sacrificed to Thing 2's ability. So Thing 1 is now going to resolve, and it'll say, sacrifice this unless you sacrifice any number of creatures with total power 12 or greater. Well, guess what? We're just going to sacrifice it. We don't want to sacrifice creatures with power 12 or greater. We'll just let that creature die to its own ability, but it's already gone, right? So it's not going to do anything. It'll essentially fizzle. So we get to keep Thing 2 on the battlefield. This interaction does work. I tip my hat to you, sir. I have been thoroughly dunked on, and I will be the first to admit it. I was wrong. However, just so that I can get my ego back where it belongs, let's talk about some rules in the comments of videos of mine where other people have gotten it wrong that I may correct. And this is one I've heard a few times, okay? Could I be wrong, but isn't shapeshifters all creature types? So you pick shapeshifter as you choose the creature type and it's all creatures technically? I had this comment a couple times actually in the Ruka Ramel video that I did, and a lot of people were like, hey, well, I'll just pick shapeshifter as a creature type because of course they're all creature types. They are not. And a lot of people make this mistake because of course shapeshifters typically have the changeling ability. And of course the changeling ability gives all creature types, but changeling, as I just said, is an ability. It is not a creature type. And there are actually quite a few shapeshifters in the game of Magic that don't have changeling at all. If I pick shapeshifter as a creature type, yeah, all my creatures are going to be shapeshifters, but they're not going to gain abilities of shapeshifters. They're just going to be the shapeshifter creature type. The shapeshifter creature type does not imbue all creature types on creatures. It is specifically the changeling mechanic that is doing that, all right? So make sure you don't make that mistake. Here's a really interesting one that I had with a patron of mine recently. Double major, green and a blue instant. Copy target creature spell you control, except it isn't legendary if the spell is legendary. They had this in their Ivy Spell Thief deck. Of course, I use this on my commander and I get 2 copies of my commander, right? That could be good. Obviously, if with Ivy's ability, if a player casts a spell that targets only a single creature, it will target Ivy as well. And of course, if you have the token copy, you get to do it again. Seems pretty good. But what my advice to them was, and this is why I don't particularly love this card, is it essentially makes you wait 2 more turns to cast your commander, right? It's turn 2. I'm playing my Ivy deck. I have double major in my hand. What do? And their answer was, I'll probably play my Ivy. And I'm like, exactly. Ivy is a creature that's cheap. You want to get it out right away so you can start using its abilities. Do I want to wait 2 more turns to then cast my double major when I'm casting my Ivy? I don't know if I want to do that, right? What double major essentially does is make you wait 2 more turns to cast your commander. Now, sometimes that might be worth it. In a lot of cases, though, I think it's not. However, the rules misconception here, and I was pretty surprised that some people were actually doing this, they thought this just created a token copy of your commander. I don't know how many people are doing this, but their thinking was, I can just cast this at some later time to create a token copy of my commander and it won't be legendary. Sorry, this card says copy target creature spell you control. And as I talked about in my zones video, whenever something talks about a spell, that's on the stack and only on the stack. Anything that refers to a spell is referring to something on the stack. Your creature spell is a creature that is currently on the stack because it is in the midst of being cast. It doesn't actually become a creature until it hits the battlefield, right? So double major has to target a creature spell, just like you would do with a counter spell, right? Counter spell says counter target spell. So there has to be a spell on the stack that you can target, or you can't even cast it. Double major, same thing. There has to be a creature spell you control on the stack in order for you to even cast this spell. That's the legal target for it, right? In order to cast any spell that requires a target, you need a legal target, and this says copy target creature spell you control. So there needs to be a creature spell you control currently on the stack in order for you to cast this at all. That's why it's an instant, because you're essentially holding priority so that you can target your own spell, right? And then the double major will resolve first, again with the first in, last out, right? The double major resolves, you get the token copy of your commander, and then the original commander, the Ivy or whatever the case may be, will then hit the battlefield. That's how that interaction's supposed to work. Here's another comment I got on the video. How does Sephorus of the Hidden Ways ability work if you have Teysa Karlov or Dreadnought Carnage Dominus when a creature dies? So again, Teysa Karlov and Dreadnought Carnage Dominus are these doubling effects, right? They trigger again. If a creature dying causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. But of course, the wording on Sephorus is the important one. Whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, venture into the dungeon, this ability triggers only once each turn. So of course, when a creature dies, that is a creature going to the graveyard. And if I have a Dreadnought in play, if a creature dying causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, and of course, a creature dying is triggering a permanent I control the trigger, right? Sephorus doesn't specifically say die, but the creature dying going to the graveyard is triggering my Sephorus. That's what dies directly translates to. Battlefield to graveyard will trigger my Sephorus and will also not trigger necessarily, but get the attention of my Dreadnought and trigger an additional time, right? Well, hold on a second. Sephorus says this ability triggers only once each turn. And that is literally what happens in this situation. If the card says this ability triggers only once each turn, that means the card only triggers once each turn. And having an effect in here that triggers an additional time is going to do nothing because it specifically says it triggers only once each turn. So that means it can't trigger more than that. However, if I have a Strionic Resonator in play, it's a different scenario. Here, I'm going to pay 2 and tap it, copy target triggered ability you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. So Sephorus has a triggered ability, right? Whenever, when, and at are always triggered abilities. So when this triggers, it goes on the stack. I'm not making it trigger an additional time like Dreadnought or Teysa. What I'm doing is I'm copying the triggered ability. That is something different. Sephorus is saying this ability cannot trigger again, but Strionic Resonator isn't triggering it again. It's copying the trigger so that you get the ability again. There is a significant difference there. Another comment I got on a video where I talked about the enchantment gods, right? And there's a lot of confusion about the enchantment gods, about when are they creatures, when are they not. What it says on the card is enchantment creature, which means that they are both enchantments and creatures at all times, except when their ability specifically makes them not a creature, right? The only thing that makes a Perforos or a Karametra not a creature is that ability that says they are not a creature unless you have the appropriate devotion. So when are they not a creature? They're not a creature when they are on the battlefield and you do not have the appropriate devotion. That is all. Everywhere else, they are a creature card. Again, not a creature. They're a creature card and they are an enchantment card. Had a comment on that video, your god interaction made me wonder if vehicles are considered creatures if they are in your hand, library, graveyard. From what you said, they should be a creature until they hit the field. Incorrect. And of course, the reason why is because essentially the opposite of the enchantment gods, right? If we look at Sky Sovereign Console Flagship, what's the type here on this card? It is a legendary artifact vehicle. It is not a creature. What's making this a creature? The crew ability is what is turning this into a creature. This would be no different than having a Karn Silver Golem on the battlefield that turns non-creature artifacts into creatures. They're not creatures until Karn's ability turns them into that. On a vehicle, the same is true, right? Crew 3, tap any number of creatures you control with total power 3 or more. This vehicle becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. So no, vehicles are not creatures in any zone. They're not creatures in your library, graveyard, hand, or while they're on the stack being cast. They are only artifacts, right? While your Sky Sovereign is in any other zone, including on the battlefield, it is a legendary artifact vehicle, not a creature. The only thing that makes it a creature is when you use that specific ability. So when you're casting this, it will not be a creature spell. You will not be able to use your double major on it, right? That's not going to work here because it's not a creature spell. It's an artifact spell. It's also a legendary spell, but it is not a creature spell. It is specifically a vehicle. The only thing that is making it a creature is that crew ability, which of course, unless you're actually using it, isn't going to do anything. So I hope that was helpful. Again, just clarifying some of the comments I see on my videos and obviously clarifying a mistake that I actually made. And I don't know, maybe I made some mistakes in this video. Feel free to correct me. I have no problem being corrected. Again, I hate being wrong about stuff. I love being corrected. When Better Commander pointed out my mistake, I was thrilled that I actually came to the right conclusion about it. I don't like being wrong about things. Who does? Why would you want to walk around with wrong information, especially when you're having games with other people, and then at some point they're going to point out how wrong you are. They pull out their phone and they show you the actual rules. Then you feel like a real idiot, right? Who would want that? I don't. So if I'm ever wrong about things, I like it to be pointed out so that I can move forward with proper information. Let me know if I get anything wrong in this video, or if you have any other Magic rules questions. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.